Accessing peace. Existing without violence, with the ability to calmly resolve conflict. Downloading love. An overwhelming, deep, positive affection towards others. Activating liberty. Living your life as you see fit without infringing on the lives of others.
Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry, the Liberty Penguin, the Wombat, the uncut cocaine of libertarianism. And back for another episode. You know, once again, I don't have any questions, but I did stumble across just a little bit ago, a fairly interesting article that I definitely want to get into. And you may have seen the headlines over the last few days about this. And yes, I know I normally don't talk about news of the day sort of things on this show. But this particular story, it's one of those that it kind of relates to me. Not that I would ever do what this person did, but reading this story, and I'll jump into it. It's from a coworker of Richard Russell. Richard Russell, the guy that, again, you may have seen the headlines over the last week. You might have even seen some of the memes, if you will, that have floated around on social media about this guy. He's the guy that worked for Horizon Airlines, stole an airplane, went joyriding, and then wound up taking his own life by crashing the plane. Now, when I first saw the story about the guy that stole the plane, went joyriding, and then the plane crashed, I thought that it was like a failed landing attempt, or he, just accidentally crashed. But a couple of days ago, I listened to the audio where he was in correspondence with air traffic control, and I have to say it was difficult to listen to. There were times where you could tell that he was not in a right state of mind. He, at one point, apologized for what he had done. There's another point where he said, "I'm just a broken guy with a couple of screws loose," while talking with air traffic control, and it sounded very much like a hostage situation. Luckily, there were no other lives really in danger here. Now, yes, if he would have crashed in the wrong spot, could have put other people's lives in danger. But again, it sounded very much like a hostage situation, to where the air traffic controller had various pilots coming on trying to help direct this guy to land the aircraft. At one point he said, "I didn't really have any intentions of landing this thing." And towards the end, he says, "I think I'm going to do a barrel roll, and if that goes all right, I'm going to put it nose down and just call it a night." And again, like I say, the audio is very difficult to listen to, just because you can realize, where this guy is mentally. But again, the story here from a website called thestranger.com, and it's an op-ed written by a former coworker of Richard Russell. He says, "I worked with Richard Russell, and I understand why he did what he did." And for people that know me, and I may have mentioned this previously, I used to work for an airline. I know I've mentioned it in various outlets. Just don't recall if I've mentioned it necessarily on this show. But I used to work for an airline. And when I saw this headline and began reading this story, it jumped out as this is something that, I need to talk about, especially because so many people don't really understand or realize what the airline industry is like, right? Like, yeah, people fly. They know what the experience of dealing with the airline is like, but very few people know what it's like actually, being inside the airport and making things go as smoothly. And yes, I realize that things don't necessarily go as smoothly for the passengers as passengers want them to go, but as smooth as they do go, there's a lot that happens there. And yeah, so let me just jump in to the article. And again, I'll pause from time to time during this article to relay some of my experiences as they relate here. So again, the link, as always, will be in the show notes. You can read it at your leisure. Written by Todd Bunker. He says, I was surprised to wake up last Saturday morning to the headlines. Not completely shocked, but surprised nonetheless. I was a ground service agent at Horizon Air for the better part of 2016 and worked alongside Richard Russell. As ground service agents, we handled baggage, walked through planes for final inspection, and pushed them out onto the taxiway. We weren't close, barely acquaintances, which seems odd considering the tight quarters and the foxhole mentality that is required to work in these particular roles. But with the high turnover, he adds, if you follow Horizon Jobs, you'll know they are always hiring for positions at SeaTac, SeaTac being Seattle-Tacoma Airport. He says it's not hard to imagine day-to-day survival on the ramp, that's the area between the terminal and the taxiway where passengers are loaded and unloaded, baggage is handled, planes are fueled, etc., requires a lot of sacrifice to keep the planes moving. It would be difficult enough if the inadequate break room didn't always resemble a crowded sweatbox college party without the drugs or alcohol, and nobody was having fun. Oh, you brought a lunch to save spending $10 a meal in the terminal? Sure hope it's in the fridge when you get to your lunch break. Nasty emails directed to anonymous lunch bandits were a common occurrence. There was a locker room, but not enough lockers for everyone. Oh, there's definitely more. Stay tuned here on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. This November, I'll be running the world's biggest and most popular marathon, the New York City Marathon, as a member of Team Innocence Project. The Innocence Project was the first legal organization to systematically apply DNA testing to cases of wrongful convictions as a powerful tool to reveal innocence. It's already been an extraordinary year for the Innocence Project and their clients. They've already freed more innocent people in the past 12 months than in any year in the history of the Innocence Project, and they're gearing up to do even more. The attorneys and paralegals for the Innocence Project are dedicated to doing whatever it takes to set an innocent person free. To support them, a new cohort of law students have recently joined and are excited to help with more than 200 cases of clients seeking to prove their innocence. 9 clients have been exonerated and reunited with their families in 2018 already, and your support now will help build on the incredible momentum of exonerations. You can support the Innocence Project by going to run.freetalklive.com. That's run.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. I will jump back into the article here in just a second. But first, I want to make sure that I tell you about Zencash. Zencash is an end-to-end encrypted system with zero-knowledge technology over which communications, data, or value can be securely transmitted and stored. With nearly 17,000 nodes between secure nodes, super nodes, and then there are probably some people just running a full node that don't have them staked as either secure or super, Zencash has one of the most distributed node systems of any cryptocurrency. Zencash is a platform for cryptocurrency and communications built by voluntarists for voluntarists, with the ideas of voluntary interaction being written into the white paper no less than half a dozen times. And the Zencash wallet is available for Linux, Mac, Windows, and Android devices. Learn more at zencash.com. Zencash.com. So, jumping back into the article here from a former co-worker of Richard Russell. Richard Russell being the former Horizon Airlines ground service worker who stole an airplane and then, unfortunately, took his own life. So the coworker here, in the headline, it says, I understand why he did what he did. He's explaining some of the day-to-day, if you will, being a baggage handler, baggage thrower, if you will. He says the break room was crowded. You were lucky if you brought a lunch from home because you didn't want to pay $10 for an airline or airport meal. You were lucky if the meal was still in the refrigerator when you got to break. He says nasty emails directed to anonymous lunch bandits were a common occurrence. There was a locker room, but not enough lockers for everyone. And again, my experience is, sometimes food would go missing. And by missing, I mean that one of your coworkers would take it, not thinking that it was theirs, but they would just take it. Lockers, I didn't really have the issue with that because I worked in generally smaller airports, but I can see if you're in a larger airport here, there's not necessarily going to be enough lockers. Well, why do you need a locker? He says, think of how many layers are required to work in the weather in Seattle. And then think about where you might put your jacket, your gloves, your hat, etc. when you don't need them and without getting them stolen. These things aren't luxuries. They're basic parts of work life. Going into the job, I knew there was a sharp disconnect between the shiny, happy side of the terminal and the grit on the ground. What I didn't realize was how much like a military base it was run, which makes sense historically, and which is why Horizon and other airlines recruit heavily from military bases. The author here says, I went through initial job training with a guy who had just spent 10 years in the Army. I asked, how was that? His response, well, I didn't blow my brains out. So I suppose working at Horizon was an upgrade. When a lot of your supervisor staff and coworkers are ex-military, you begin to realize what being expendable is. And he refers here to Russell as Bebo, which apparently was a nickname. He says, I believe Bebo was acutely aware of that because we all were. It's the kind of dehumanizing situation that can lead to what happened on August 10th. Now, I'm going to pause here for a moment and relay an experience of my own just before I wound up leaving the airline. So for those of you not familiar, I worked for a Delta subsidiary from 2006 until early 2010. And during that time, Delta merged with Northwest Airlines, and I'm using air quotes there, because what actually happened, and I have no evidence of this other than circumstantial, but what I am convinced happened was that Northwest Airlines bought Delta, but let Delta keep the name because Delta had better name recognition and was an older company. Why do I say that Northwest bought Delta? Well, generally in a merger, the larger company, which would have been Delta, would have gotten the new CEO, would have retained a majority of the board of directors, would have retained policies. What actually happened is Northwest got to name the CEO, Northwest got a majority of the board of directors, and all of the new policies that went into place, you guessed it, they were policies from Northwest Airlines. Delta treated their subsidiary employees very well prior to the merger. After the merger, when Northwest took over, subsidiary employees were treated shall we say, lower than a redheaded stepchild. And everybody knows about the supposed ill treatment of redheaded stepchildren. So, one of the new regional managers came around to where I was working in Myrtle Beach at the time and asked me, Darryl, what do you think about this merger? I made the mistake of telling this person the truth instead of telling them what they wanted to hear. I said, well, I'm not really happy with it. I was supposed to have gotten a pay raise coming up on my anniversary date. I was told that that's pushed back at least 6 months. My flight benefits are now harder to use. I'm getting less vacation time. And you've got us doing more work with fewer employees because they wound up reducing the number of people per shift because reasons. The response I received from the regional supervisor was not, thank you for this input. I'll go back to corporate and let them know, and maybe we can wind up figuring out how to keep you happy. No. The response that I got from the regional manager was, and I quote, just be glad you still have a job. We could have fired everyone. Yeah, that was the actual response. I still remember it 8 years later. Just be glad you still have a job. We could have fired everyone. If that doesn't say expendable, I don't know what does. We'll continue with this article from a former co-worker of Richard Russell at Horizon Air in moments here on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. In 1999, Darryl W. Perry began a search for traditional values, which led him down a path to the ideas of liberty. He tells the story in A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty. Of the book, Dr. Brian Sovereign says, sometimes it's funny, and sometimes I think it's crazy, but it's always authentic. Ask for A Rebel's Journey wherever books are sold, or visit arebelsjourney.com. Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system and to fully capitalize on that decision in their fundraising efforts. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com.
Hey, this is Adam from the ANCAP Barbershop. You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
Hey, welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. Continuing on with this article, jumping back into it, and yes, the link will be in the show notes where you can read it at your leisure. Co-worker, or rather former co-worker of Richard Russell, Todd Bunker, continuing, says if the environment itself isn't enough to persuade you that you're nothing more than a cog to the upper management and shareholders, there are plenty of others, even more exasperating reminders. You're making around $3 per hour less than everybody else at the airport, including other airline employees, restaurant employees, car rental employees, bus drivers, etc. Although there are benefits, health insurance and stock options might be nice, but they don't pay the rent. However, a vast majority of the ground service agents are men under the age of 30, so insurance and stock options mean little to nothing to them. They become empty gestures from a management who knows you'll never use them, and thus it costs the company very little. But that's only part of the picture. To be clear, the people I worked with were dedicated, hardworking, safety-conscious, attempting to be loyal, all of the things that are supposed to get you ahead in this country. But the workers on the ground and our immediate supervisors could barely keep our heads above water. As a subsidiary of Alaska Air Group, Horizon Air is the proverbial red-headed stepchild. It's a glaringly clear to everyone who works there that cost-cutting by the executive team is in order to keep the shareholders happy is the main goal, and Horizon is the first stop on the belt-tightening train. We, the lowest level employees, knew that when the record quarterly earnings report came out, there wasn't going to be any trickle down. He says, when I worked for Horizon, we were cursing our low-wage fate in the break room while Alaska was spending $2.5 billion acquiring Virgin America. Got to keep up with Delta. And then investing another $2.5 billion upgrading their turboprop airplane fleets to jets. Acquisitions and sexy new jets play well at the stockholder meeting. Increased labor cost, not so much. The first thing I thought when I heard the news about a plane being stolen by a Horizon employee was, yes, the end of summer. Of course, summer is nearly constantly as busy as the holiday season. This worker says, my summer of 2016 kicked off with a new schedule. We bid on shifts every 3 to 4 months, which, as it turns out, was literally generated by a computer program. X number of flights, X number of employees, some advanced mathematics, and poof, perfection. Except the schedule that summer was so out of touch with what was going on the ground that a handful of veteran employees went to management and successfully lobbied for a do-over because the schedule was just unrealistic and featured far too many employees at any given time compared to experienced ones. An important perk are monthly bonuses, which can range from $50 to $200 a month, depending on target numbers. About halfway through my summer tenure, we were informed that the bonus structure was being revamped. It now included delays caused by weather and air traffic control, circumstances completely out of our control. This was described as more realistic to the situation on the ground. He says, in reality, it was morale murder. Now, let me explain some of these target numbers. On-time flights is a target number. Baggage lost or baggage delayed, that's another target. And that's something that the ground handlers are generally responsible for. Now, the vast majority of time, it's not the people in these smaller airports that misload bags. It's generally going to be an employee in one of the hubs. So we're talking Atlanta, Detroit, Minneapolis, Chicago, Dallas, Salt Lake, LA, any one of the New York airports, Philly, Charlotte. The hub, the airports that you go to and then you catch a transfer flight. Because airlines operate on this hub and spoke sort of thing. And then, they're adding in things that are completely out of control of the actual airline workers. So, it is going to decrease morale. Like when they wound up, delaying pay increases and making it harder to use benefits. That kills morale. Continuing on here, he says, this is all to say that I can understand what could drive a normal person to do what Richard Russell did. He saw his chance for relevance, to be simply acknowledged as an individual human being, and he grabbed it. I don't condone it, and I wish it would have turned out with a spectacular landing that he could have walked away from as a folk hero to some. I'll leave the question of exactly how he did it to investigators. Richard's situation was not unusual for what morphed into a wage slave economy. The fact that he had access to a plane makes it sensational. There are plenty of people out there making not enough money, and they keep plugging along, not stealing multi-million-dollar aircraft and crashing them. But the next time you're at SeaTac, take the chance to look out at Horizon's gates from the main food court and marvel at the controlled chaos on the ground. Off to your left, you'll see baggage tugs speeding to and from the catacombs under the terminal. Further out, Delta planes lurk, large. And when you step onto the stairway of your next flight, holding onto that Big Mac you bought in the terminal because otherwise there's no reasonably priced food on the plane, customers are now just numbers as well. Remember that the person who flipped your burger is probably making $3 per hour more than the person who handles your luggage, walks around the plane doing final inspections, and ultimately pushes the plane full of 76 souls out to the overcrowded taxiway to send you off safely. Your life depends on the work they do. Stay tuned. There's more here on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at weusecoins.com. That's weusecoins.com. Born into a devastating world and raised among the crowd, the Cloudwalker assumes a new identity and begins the unrelenting quest for truth. In this epic journey, he discovers dark secrets about aspects of his previous life that he once trusted. Through the Journal of the Cloudwalker, he shares both the traumatic hardships and the eternal beauties of his experiences. Fueled in the beginning by his unsettling thoughts and emotions, he learns how to find peace with everything he has woken up to. Dear Society by the Cloudwalker is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry, the Liberty Penguin, the wombat, the uncut cocaine of libertarianism. And before I share my final thoughts here, I want to make sure that I tell you about a website that you, if you use Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, that you need to wind up adding into your arsenal, or at least into your bookmarks, talking about Spend a Bit. It's the search engine for things that you can buy with Bitcoin. Spend a Bit has aggregated millions of products from thousands of Bitcoin-enabled merchants. Keep your money in the free economy. Spend a bit. Use my affiliate link, spendabit.fppradio.com. And if you're a Bitcoin accepting merchant like I am, ask about their merchant suite to reach even more customers. And earlier this week, I wound up getting an email where Spendabit is allowing the listing of various altcoins that merchants are accepting. I've not gone through the processes yet of listing the various altcoins that I'm accepting, but just know that soon you'll be able to search for things that you can use other cryptocurrencies to purchase. Dash, Zencash, Zcash, Litecoin. There are a bunch of them. And yeah, Spend a Bit. That's the search engine. I've completely lost my train of thought there. I don't think I can buy a train of thought from Spend a Bit. But if somebody sells it for crypto, it's probably listed there, spendabit.fppradio.com. So final thoughts here on the situation out there in Seattle where Richard Russell, again, a very disturbed individual, stole an airplane, took it for a joyride, and then wound up taking his own life. Yeah, it's a very difficult situation indeed, and I definitely feel for his family, for his co-workers, and there's not really a lot that I can add to this letter written, again, by a former co-worker of Richard Russell's from Horizon Airlines. And yeah, it sounds as though I got out of the airline industry at the right time because, yeah, airline employees and, well, passengers as well. You're just cogs in the machine. You're a replaceable cog. And that's not a way to live, right? Nobody wants to be a replaceable cog. Don't forget, every Friday I answer your questions. Send those over ama.fppradio.com.
The podcasts of FPP Radio are licensed under Copy Heart. We believe that copying is a form of flattery and do not abide by the copyright laws. Those laws serve to restrict the flow of ideas which no one can really own. Copying is an act of love. Love is not subject to law. If you enjoy the show, consider joining the Fans program and get perks like ad-free versions of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio and FPP Radio News, and also get a copy of the monthly newspaper FPP News. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com.